This narrative explores the often overlooked history of dark-skinned indigenous peoples in the Americas and challenges the dominant historical narrative that all African Americans are solely descendants of African slaves brought through the transatlantic slave trade. Historically, European colonists often misclassified and conflated dark-skinned Native Americans with Africans, erasing their unique identities and cultural heritage. Evidence suggests that many indigenous tribes with diverse features, such as the Yamasee and Shaka, existed in the Americas long before European colonization. Some explorers, like James Adair, noted the physical diversity among Native American populations, with some tribes exhibiting darker skin tones that resembled those of the Moors in Africa. However, colonial records often skewed these observations, driven by racial biases and the desire to create rigid hierarchies. This misclassification served colonial interests by justifying the enslavement and marginalization of Native populations alongside Africans. The enslavement of Native Americans, numbering in the millions, paralleled the transatlantic slave trade, further blurring the lines between these groups in historical accounts. The loss of their indigenous identity through enslavement contributed to the misconception that all dark-skinned peoples in America were of African origin. Re-examining this history challenges simplified racial categorizations and highlights the complex ancestry of African Americans, which may include Aboriginal lineage from America's indigenous peoples. This broader perspective underscores the need to reassess historical narratives and recognize the diverse roots of African American heritage. The history of slavery in the Americas reveals a loss of both freedom and identity for those who were enslaved. Native Americans, like Africans, were forced to abandon their cultural practices, languages, and histories to conform to the traditions imposed by European colonists. This erasure was not confined to the English colonies, but occurred across the Americas, including in Spanish-controlled regions, where dark-skinned Native Americans were frequently enslaved. Historian Andrés Resendez, in his book The Other Slavery, The Uncovered Story of Indian Enslavement in America, highlights how the enslavement of Native Americans was integral to the colonial economy. African slaves and Black Aboriginal tribes shared similar struggles and aspirations for liberation, fostering relationships between these communities. Intermarriage between African slaves and Native Americans created a mixed lineage, resulting in descendants who embodied both ancestries. However, when dark-skinned Aboriginal tribes intermarried, their descendants retained their distinct physical traits. The U.S. government's policies further complicated this history. The Dawes Act of 1887 aimed to assimilate Native Americans by allotting tribal lands to individuals listed on tribal rolls. However, it systematically excluded those of mixed African and Native American descent by reclassifying them as African Americans. This reclassification denied them land rights and severed their indigenous identities, making it easier for the government to seize surplus lands and sell them to European settlers. This strategy not only displaced Native American communities, but also erased the indigenous heritage within African American populations. Over time, many African Americans with Native American ancestry lost knowledge of their roots, encouraged instead to identify solely with their African lineage. Physical traits such as straight hair, prominent cheekbones, or specific skin tones in some African Americans today may serve as living reminders of their Native ancestry, even as the historical narrative has largely overlooked this heritage. The dominant story of African American ancestry being solely tied to African slaves transported during the transatlantic slave trade omits the complexities of indigenous contributions. While this narrative is not entirely false, it neglects the shared and interwoven histories of African and Native American peoples, which continue to influence African American identity today. The history of Black Native American tribes is a complex and deeply intertwined story of resilience, survival, and cultural fusion. These communities emerged from shared struggles against oppression and colonization, forming unique identities that blended African and Native traditions. Despite their significant roles in American history, these tribes have been largely ignored or erased from mainstream narratives. Throughout history, African slaves often found refuge within Native American tribes, escaping the brutality of slavery to join communities that accepted them as equals. These alliances were not only built on necessity, but also on mutual resistance to colonization and shared values. For instance, the Seminole tribe in the southeastern United States welcomed runaway slaves, integrating them into their society as free individuals. This blending of cultures created unique communities that stood as symbols of defiance against colonial forces. The Seminole Wars highlight the strength of these alliances, as these communities fiercely resisted U.S. government encroachment. The erasure of Black Native American tribes from historical accounts reflects broader efforts to oversimplify and distort history. These tribes played crucial roles in shaping both Native and African American identities, contributing to the cultural landscape of the nation. Their legacies, however, have been overshadowed by narratives that prioritize European settlers and minimize the diverse origins of the United States. Rediscovering and honoring the stories of these tribes is essential for understanding the full scope of American history. Their contributions demonstrate how African and Native American communities influenced one another and created resilient identities in the face of adversity. By reclaiming these erased histories, we can better appreciate the depth and richness of the cultural tapestry that defines the nation. The question remains, how much of African American ancestry today traces back to these native Black American tribes? And how does this shape contemporary identity? Sharing family stories, examining personal histories, and engaging in discussions about this shared heritage are critical steps in unraveling the complexity of this legacy. These stories remind us that the narrative of America is not singular, but a mosaic of interconnected cultures, struggles, and triumphs. The history of Black Native American tribes reveals a profound and complex narrative of resilience, cultural fusion, and struggle for justice. Through policies of forced relocation, assimilation, and disenfranchisement, the United States attempted to erase the diverse identities within these communities. This erasure extended into the modern era, with descendants of enslaved Black people who became integral members of tribes like the Cherokee, Choctaw, and Creek often being excluded from tribal citizenship and rights. A striking example of this continued disenfranchisement is the plight of the Cherokee freedmen, descendants of enslaved Black individuals in the Cherokee Nation. Despite their ancestors' contributions and sacrifices, these individuals have had to engage in prolonged legal battles for recognition and inclusion. Their struggle highlights the persistent injustices faced by Black Native Americans, whose histories are essential to both Native and African American narratives. The significance of uncovering these erased histories lies in their power to challenge oversimplified narratives of race and identity in America. Recognizing the contributions of Black Native Americans not only enriches our understanding of history, but also fosters justice and healing. These stories demonstrate the shared legacies of resistance and survival that shaped the nation's cultural and political landscape. Among the many examples of Black Native American tribes, the Black Seminoles stand out as a remarkable case of resilience and alliance. Emerging in the 18th century, this community was born out of the collaboration between African refugees, escaped slaves seeking freedom, and the Seminole tribes of Florida. The Spanish offered sanctuary to runaway slaves as a strategy to weaken English colonies, and many found refuge and allies in the Seminole people. Over time, these groups forged a unique identity, blending African and Seminole customs, language, and traditions into a cohesive and powerful community. The Black Seminoles became key players in the Seminole Wars, resisting U.S. efforts to forcibly relocate Native American tribes. Leaders like John Horse exemplified their courage and military prowess, using their deep knowledge of the land and their unified strength to fight for freedom and sovereignty. Their story underscores the active role Black Native Americans played in shaping the resistance against colonization and the fight for justice. As we revisit these forgotten histories, we honor the legacy of Black Native American tribes and their indelible impact on the broader American narrative. Their stories are a testament to the strength and complexity of identities forged through struggle and unity, and they deserve recognition in our collective memory. By bringing these histories into the spotlight, we not only restore their rightful place in history, but also enrich our understanding of the intertwined roots that define America. The stories of the Black Seminoles and the Cherokee freedmen shed light on the resilience and contributions of Black Native American communities, while also highlighting the persistent injustices they have faced. These narratives, often sidelined in mainstream history, are vital to understanding the intertwined legacies of African Americans and Native Americans. The Black Seminoles emerged as a unique and resilient community formed by escaped African slaves who found refuge with the Seminole tribe in Florida during the 18th century. Over time, they blended African and Native customs, creating a distinct culture and identity. During the Seminole Wars, the Black Seminoles played a pivotal role, leveraging their knowledge of the land and military skills to resist U.S. forces. Leaders like John Horse became symbols of their fight for freedom and self-determination. Despite their contributions, the Black Seminoles' legacy has been largely overlooked. After being outnumbered and outgunned by U.S. forces, many Black Seminoles, led by John Horse, sought safety in Mexico. Eventually, they were incorporated into the Seminole Nation in Oklahoma. However, in the 20th century, their descendants faced marginalization, often excluded from tribal roles and denied recognition. This erasure reflects broader efforts to diminish their cultural and historical significance, yet their traditions and stories continue to be preserved by their descendants and activists. The Cherokee freedmen represent another critical chapter in the history of Black Native Americans. Enslaved by the Cherokee prior to the Civil War, many were later freed and promised full citizenship within the Cherokee Nation as part of post-war treaties with the U.S. government. These treaties recognized the freedmen as integral members of the Cherokee community, granting them equal rights and status. However, by the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the Cherokee Nation began efforts to exclude the freedmen, fueled by racial prejudice and a desire to maintain a pure Native identity. Citizenship rights were stripped away, and the freedmen were disenfranchised despite their historical and cultural ties to the Cherokee people. The struggle for recognition continues, with modern descendants fighting to reclaim their rightful place within the Cherokee Nation. Legal battles, including the controversial 2007 vote to remove the freedmen from tribal roles, have sparked debates about race, identity, and historical justice. The legacies of the Black Seminoles and Cherokee freedmen underscore the profound challenges faced by Black Native American communities. Their histories reveal the intersections of race, culture, and identity while exposing the injustices of exclusion and erasure. These stories demand recognition not only for their historical accuracy, but also for the contributions these communities made to both African American and Native American histories. By rediscovering and honoring these narratives, we enrich our understanding of American history and acknowledge the resilience of those who fought to preserve their identities and cultures against tremendous odds. These communities were not merely victims of history. They were active participants in shaping a shared legacy of resistance, survival, and cultural fusion that continues to influence the fabric of the United States today. The story of the Creek freedmen is a powerful testament to resilience, sacrifice, and the ongoing struggle for justice and recognition. Born out of the intersection of Native American and African American histories, their legacy illustrates the complexities of identity and the challenges of overcoming systemic erasure. During the 19th century, the Creek Nation, like many other Southern tribes, became involved in the institution of slavery. Enslaved African individuals, known as Black Creek, played an integral role in the Creek Nation's social and economic structures. Following the Civil War and the Emancipation Proclamation, these individuals were freed and granted the opportunity to fight for full citizenship within the tribe. The Creek Treaty of 1866 marked a turning point for the Creek freedmen, as it formally recognized them as full citizens of the Creek Nation. This treaty granted them the rights to own land, vote, and participate in the tribe's governance. Politically, socially, and militarily, the freedmen became vital contributors to the Creek Nation's post-war recovery. Many Black Creek individuals had fought in the Civil War, aligning with both the Union and Confederate sides, depending on the circumstances. Their military service, particularly for the Union, demonstrated their commitment to the Creek Nation's sovereignty and autonomy. After the war, the Creek freedmen played an essential role in rebuilding their communities, contributing to the economy and reshaping the social fabric of the Creek Nation. They bridged African American and Native American histories, blending cultural legacies in ways that enriched both communities. Despite these contributions, the recognition and rights promised to them under the 1866 treaty were consistently undermined over the years. In 1979, the Creek Nation voted to restrict citizenship to those with at least one-fourth Creek blood, effectively disenfranchising many descendants of the freedmen. This policy was a significant blow to their status and sparked outrage, as it ignored the treaty's promises and the freedmen's historical contributions. Legal battles over their rights and recognition ensued, culminating in a 2020 decision to readmit freedmen descendants as full citizens. However, this victory was met with controversy, and disputes over tribal membership persist. The Creek freedmen's ongoing fight for equality is emblematic of broader struggles faced by Black Native American communities. Their exclusion from tribal roles reflects a history of systemic discrimination and erasure, perpetuating the marginalization of their legacy. This erasure undermines the vital role they played in the Creek Nation's history and the larger narratives of Native American and African American resistance and survival. The Creek freedmen story is not just about historical injustice. It is a modern-day struggle for recognition, equality, and the preservation of their legacy. By denying their rightful place within the Creek Nation, the tribe not only disregards the sacrifices and contributions of its African American members, but also perpetuates a pattern of exclusion rooted in colonial and racial hierarchies. This ongoing fight highlights the need to revisit and honor the complex histories of Black Native American communities. The Creek freedmen's perseverance serves as a powerful reminder that the pursuit of justice and equality is far from over. Their legacy is an essential part of the Creek Nation's history, and their story enriches our understanding of the intertwined narratives of Native American and African American experiences. By shedding light on these histories, we honor their resilience and ensure that their contributions are no longer overlooked but recognized as an integral part of the broader story of America's diverse heritage. The story of the Seminole Negro Indian Scouts is a poignant chapter in the intertwined histories of African Americans and Native Americans, reflecting resilience, bravery, and the fight for recognition. This unique group of soldiers, composed primarily of Black Seminoles and some of their Native counterparts, played an instrumental role in the U.S. Army during the Indian Wars of the late 19th century. Despite their vital contributions, their legacy has often been overlooked in both military and Native American history. The Black Seminoles were descendants of enslaved Africans who escaped to join the Seminole tribe in Florida, blending African and Native traditions into a distinct culture. By the late 1800s, these communities had become known for their survival skills, military prowess, and knowledge of rugged terrains. Recognizing their value, the U.S. Army enlisted the Seminole Negro Indian Scouts to assist in campaigns against indigenous resistance in the southwestern frontier, particularly during the Apache Wars. The Scouts' unmatched tracking skills, intimate knowledge of the land, and combat expertise made them invaluable to the U.S. military. Their efforts were crucial in several key operations, including the capture of Geronimo in 1886, a pivotal event in the U.S. Army's campaign to subdue Native American resistance. Beyond reconnaissance, the Scouts engaged directly in combat, demonstrating exceptional bravery and tactical skill. Their service extended beyond military campaigns. For many Scouts, joining the Army was a way to secure their rights as free men and protect their communities. Having experienced or descended from the horrors of slavery, the Scouts saw their role as both a defense of their freedom and a testament to their dual heritage as African Americans and Seminoles. Despite their critical role, the Seminole Negro Indian Scouts have been largely excluded from mainstream narratives of military and Native American history. Unlike units such as the Buffalo Soldiers, their contributions have often been relegated to the periphery, overshadowed by larger historical events. Their achievements in the Apache Wars and other campaigns remain underrepresented in history books, war memorials, and public discourse. This erasure extends into Native American history as well. Within the Seminole Nation, the contributions of Black Seminoles have historically been marginalized, with their Black heritage sometimes downplayed. For much of the 20th century, their legacy was ignored, even by the communities they helped defend. In recent years, descendants, historians, and activists have worked to reclaim the legacy of the Seminole Negro Indian Scouts. Efforts to commemorate their sacrifices have gained momentum, with calls for formal acknowledgement of their role in shaping U.S. history. These efforts aim to honor their dual identity and ensure that their contributions are recognized as integral to both African American and Native American narratives. The story of the Seminole Negro Indian Scouts is one of extraordinary courage, resilience, and determination. Their fight was not only against external adversaries, but also against the systemic erasure of their contributions from history. They embodied the dual struggle of African Americans and Native Americans for freedom, justice, and recognition in a society that often sought to marginalize both groups. Their bravery in the face of immense challenges, their tactical ingenuity, and their commitment to protecting their communities and freedoms are hallmarks of their legacy. The Seminole Negro Indian Scouts were more than soldiers. They were defenders of their heritage, symbols of resilience, and key contributors to the complex history of resistance in the American frontier. The recognition of their contributions is long overdue. Honoring their legacy not only restores a missing piece of history, but also enriches our understanding of the diverse and interconnected struggles that have shaped the United States. By celebrating the Seminole Negro Indian Scouts, we affirm the importance of acknowledging all who have played pivotal roles in the ongoing pursuit of freedom and equality. Their story is a reminder of the strength found in unity and the enduring impact of courage in the face of adversity.